Hey everyone, Darren DOG here again, and welcome to another, or perhaps the first, depending on which order you've watched it in, Gender Mender Q&A. Yes, and I've got a great question here from MJ. Let me just read it out to you. Give me a second here. It says, my question, you talk about each sex having both the masculine and feminine energy traits. Do we, males and females, each have 50% of masculinity and 50% of femininity? Because what I struggle to understand is what really makes a man masculine if he has both. Why and how can he be more masculine than feminine? And vice versa for women. Why and how can they be more feminine than masculine? What defines men as being masculine creatures and women as being feminine creatures? I realise this is a very in-depth question. Well, thank you, MJ. You are right. That is an in-depth question. Whether I can get to the bottom of all of it in a single video, I don't know. But certainly, across the scope of all the Gender Mender work and my other gender material, hopefully people will be able to discover that answer more in-depth for themselves. Well, let's address the question one bit at a time. Okay, to the first part of your question, MJ. Do we have 50% of masculinity and femininity? Well, yes. Because, remembering in the Toltec tradition, they are expressions of electromagnetism, where the masculine is the electrical and the feminine is the magnetic, and they are inseparable. And we definitely all have a balance of both, but it depends on which one's on the outside and which one's on the inside, and that can vary. If you're the kind of person that believes in different lives, where we've all been different sexes and different lives, and that would certainly hold true to that. If you're not into that kind of thing, it doesn't matter, because you can just grasp the electromagnetic stuff and realise that they both have to be in balance to some extent. And when they are out of balance, which can happen as a result of conditioning or as a result of personal behavioural choices over time and choices to suppress and conceal aspects of self or qualities of self, then it can seem like one has more feminine or more masculine, but they are both present within us and we can all draw upon them. And I really think the growing dexterity of consciousness to spot that in recent years is partly what's given rise to all this gender confusion, is that people are more aware to see that they seem to have qualities of both in them, and they do seem to be somewhat balanced. So what now? And that's but this is a different question from biology, obviously. But anyway, the biology is the indicator as to which one is on the outside and which is on the inside. And this is about which toolkit we've got to be effective in life, and to be our most effective and to be our most, to achieve our potential. It's about which toolkit is easier for us to use and which one are we going to be better with. Now, I know there's plenty of people out there, especially from the modern gender confused and non-identifying community, that may beg to differ on this, but I'm happy to have any personal debates on that, because it is about the courage to be whole and to be true to ourselves. And this is challenging, because to be true to oneself is immensely vulnerable. The most terrifying exposure, the most raw, naked exposure of self imaginable, as if we were literally turned inside out with our hearts and organs on show to the world. That's what it feels like to truly be in your gender, and to truly be in the masculine or the feminine if you're a man or a woman. That's what it feels like. It's not what it looks like. It's just what it feels like. It looks the opposite. It looks dazzlingly attractive in both men and women when they're in the power, even if that person feels like they are naked and exposed and vulnerable. It doesn't look that way. And what we've got these days is people putting on robo-suits of the opposite behaviours to protect from that feeling of vulnerability. And although they claim they feel more vulnerable doing the opposite, it's a total smokescreen. For some people, it's still easier to bolt on this mask of the other than it is to face the reality of who and what we are. So, and the Toltecs would say that, and Tayud Maris wrote about this decades ago, a generation ago, where men find it easier to be in the feminine than in the masculine, and women find it easier to be in the masculine than the feminine. And so we flip ourselves inside out as if we stuck our skeleton on the outside, men and women alike, flipping their genders. So men putting the magnetic on the outside, the accepting, the receiving, the tolerant, and women putting the masculine on the outside, the point maker, the charge taker, the intolerant, the non-acceptor. And it puts us in a bit of a pickle because we have to maintain that all the time. And if somebody gets past our maintenance of those things, then it pierces us right to the core. We can be devastated. And it's because we've got it the wrong way around. When we get it the right way around, it looks like the soft, vulnerable exterior is on the outside, but when you poke past it, you'll just find an unshakable skeleton behind it. Unbreakable, the unbreakable truth of our spirit. The human spirit can only be broken when it's the wrong way around, or when it is being exploited by those who are more powerful, when it's in a position where it's not had a chance to develop itself properly, and it's not had it demonstrated how to develop itself properly, so that the gender permutation is in a way that is beautiful and radiant for all to enjoy, but the person feels in their power and is using the toolkit of the sex for that life. So in that respect, for now what did you say, how can we be more masculine and feminine? So for a man to be more masculine and feminine, he's got to start drawing his lines more. You need to watch my other videos on the gender permutations and how they work. But he needs to be drawing more lines, making clearer decisions, being confident in his decision making through practice. And it does take practice to do that, and it means accepting that you're going to be excluding certain outcomes and options by making clear decisions. You know, this is a real consequence. That's why so many people avoid decision making these days, but it's a masculine thing. So clearer decisions, self-assertion, taking charge, these things are all very masculine, and if a man wants to be more in his masculine, then he needs to do that. But it needs to be balanced with the feminine, of course. And that's what makes him more masculine, is actually having the balance the right way around, so that his charge taking, decision making is first, not his tolerance and his acceptance first. And for women it's the other way around as well, where not that they need to be accepting and receptive in any particular submissive way, but in the way where and again you have to watch some other videos on how that receptivity works as a magnet, as a compass, as a compass that reads magnetism in such a beautiful way as to inform exquisite point making from the female. And in that way, for a woman to be able to make her most beautiful, exquisite points, she has to allow herself to be in the feminine receptive first. And what we see in the world a lot of the time is the women are just not receiving anymore. And so they've got this really vicious point making first. And I'm broadly generalizing the general feminist press here, not the plenty of vulnerable feeling women who are in their femininity and are looking for a good man out there. I'm talking about the more the angrier ones. The ones who have got more point making than receptivity, and who won't allow themselves to receive because it makes them feel vulnerable. So anyway, where are we at with this question? Yeah, what makes a man masculine if he has both, and a female feminine if she has both? It's just that. It's about having the permutation the right way around. And it's a really subtle thing. This is why I said, you know, you need to expose yourself more to the gender work to get to the bottom of this one, because if you look at the yin and yang symbol, neither is bigger than the other, and at the heart of each lies the other. And they are also of equal size and power. So it's more about the flow between them and the balance between them that determines whether a man is being masculine or whether a woman is being feminine. And it's about using that toolkit. So most women in powerful positions these days are actually using the masculine and not the feminine. I love the work of, now I need to find her name here because she deserves her name pronounced properly. Where is she? Hold on a second, excuse me. Okay, her name is Kawthar Dharmoni. So Kawthar Dharmoni is literally the only human who's graduated gender studies that I am remotely interested, that I've encountered, that I'm remotely interested in what she's got to say, because she is absolutely gender balanced. I mean, I don't agree with everything she's got to say, but I love her gender balance in herself. Her energy is exquisite because she is feminine on the outside, but her masculine point maker on the inside is dynamite. But she delivers it through the vessel of her feminine, which just is a delight to experience. And who can not respond well to that? You know, she is, you know, I shared her work and so many people were like, oh, I love what she's got to say, fabulous. Now, if we took your average typical gender studied feminist, man or woman, well, no, women in this instance, because the men would do it in a different way. So a woman in this instance, and she's in her masculine first. Nobody's getting to see her feminine because she wants to hide it because she feels too vulnerable in it. And so she's out there giving it all the point making, giving it all the angry energy, being defensive on behalf of all women. Okay, we can hear her. I can definitely hear her. I can appreciate some of the points. But has she endeared me to be supportive of her cause? No. Is she going to get her way by having people come on board in a passionate, supportive way? Only the like-minded. And otherwise, people might hump and haw and kind of agree on the logic, but it's not going to be wholehearted in the way that Kawthar Dharmoni evokes support and people to ally with her position. They're completely different. And similarly with men, if you've got a really feminine, so that means in his accepting, receptive nature, for which the best examples, I suppose, are some of the stoner hippie men you see out there, or of which I've been one, or the, you know, just your average modern effeminate man who's up there making his pleas for you to join his cause or something like that. The same logic applies where, okay, I might follow his reason and logic and be like, okay, yeah, I can get on board with that. But I might be quarter or half-hearted about it. Rather than if there's a man there with his feeling inside, you know, that has really produced this point making he wants to make, but he is not necessarily on fire with it, but he is in his power with it. And he is there making clear points, passionate points, but in a way where you can sense this contained potency that's been well managed within him. The man that allows the charge to be in him, people are like, yes, I'm with you, I hear you, I feel I feel your feeling on this, and I feel your fire, but I don't feel attacked by you. I want to be with you. You've got me. Where do I sign up? I don't know if those examples are resonating with you. It's difficult to get the point across because this is really subtle. But the differences when they're on show are chalk and cheese. It's the difference between everybody being fired up and passionate and empowered and there being a sort of quarter-hearted, petition signing, Facebook sharing endeavour. Now, again, don't get me wrong, you know, obviously angry, outraged people all placarding and stuff can bring about change. But are they winning people over or are they just bullying people into silence? A little bit of both. Some people are being won over, but I think a lot of people are just being bullied into silence. Whereas that's not creating inclusion. It's not creating cohesion. Whereas gender balance creates inclusion and cohesion where People can express their passions. They can express what they're outraged about. But when the gender permutations are the right way around, it's like watching a fire spread where everybody gets lit up by it and nobody gets burnt. And yeah, that's pretty much all I want to say on that kind of analogy slash metaphor. I always get confused over what's an analogy and what's a metaphor. Not very good for a word guy, is it? So let me see, let me just scroll back down and see if I've addressed all the points in this question, because we're getting on to like 15 minutes here now. This is long for our so-called Q&A, but it was such a nuanced point, MJ. I really appreciated it, and I have been avoiding answering this question. You have asked me it more than once, and I've been like, oh, this is so nuanced. Okay, where is it? Here we go. So, have we got 50-50? I've answered that. Yes, electromagnetically we do. How can it be more masculine and feminine? By having the charge and the electrical on the outside and the magnetic on the inside, and vice versa for women. And what defines them? Yeah, defining, let's give ourselves a few years to work together on the gender process to arrive at a clearer map of that, because this is, it's a bit like if you picture the yin and the yang, and what's happened in the modern world is that people have tried to remove the line that's between them. So people say, yes, masculine, yes, feminine, but what's the line in between them? People ignore that bit, and this is what, you know, the 50 shades of grey that's been created in the world has been because people have tried to get rid of that line. And it's not through that central, it's not through the obfuscation of that central line that the masculine and the feminine are in a spectrum with each other. It's through the heart of each other. So, yeah, I lost my thread talking about that there. What was I saying about the yin and the yang? Bum, 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 bum. Vice versa. Yeah. So I'm going to wrap it up. Oh yes, my point being that we are only just, as a species, having the dexterity of consciousness to pick apart what is emotion, what is mind, what is body, and what is gender. We've only just achieving that maturity of edge to be able to spot it, and in a way we are walking ever closer to that line between the masculine and the feminine that's on the yin and the yang. But it's not a line that's being drawn by some third force or third entity or third sex. It's not that. It's a line that, although maybe the intersex people represent that line, but that line is more like when you look at the sea, or you look at rivers meeting, you'll see that when two currents come up against each other, there seems to be a line there where the two currents meet. But it's not a line. The line is it's not a line that's drawn actively. The line is the result of the pressures of these forces. It's the result of these different nuanced currents coming into contact with each other. And so it is with the line between that on the yin and the yang. And what we're doing in this modern gender exploration, and indeed in this gender mender work that I'm doing, is trying to get step edge ever closer to that line so we can get a clearer sense of which is which. Will we ever have the absolute language for what defines the line between the two? I'm not entirely sure. It's like trying to say, can we separate the electrical and the magnetic? Oh, I'm not really sure. And I don't feel like, and you know, there needs to be an answer to that right now, because we're not at that stage. I think we're at the stage where there needs to be more exploration of flipping between the masculine and the feminine, the electrical and the magnetic within us, to improve our communication, improve our relationships, improve our internal mapping and dexterity and expression of self. And then those people, the more mastered of us in weeks or years to come, they can answer that question with greater clarity. It's a bit like when I used to do hill walking when I was younger. I used to be looking up the hill and going, why am I doing this? Look at that peak in the distance. Why did I come out here? And I would see a ridge coming up and I'd be like, how am I going to get over that ridge? And then I had an epiphany one day, which is, I don't have to get over that ridge. I just have to take the next step. The Darren, who's 2 steps before that ridge, will worry about how he's going to get over that ridge. I just need to take the same step, the next step. And I hope this video has helped, you know, create a bit of mapping to allow for a bit of the next step in for you. I've had to come back and do an edit on this because I wasn't really happy with how I tackled some of the nuance on the feminine and the masculine. Mainly to do with the use of the language, taking charge and the point making, and the only example of the word angry as being that of a charge energy, because it's not. All emotions are charge energy because they're all about the desire for change and for the world to be different. And the other element of taking charge is it's about taking charge within the self, not over others. So that's that point cleared up. Now, on to clearing up the point on women's femininity and men's masculinity. This is really all about balls energy, and balls on the inside and balls on the outside of the body cavity. And that's, so men get their masculinity cultivated by how they interpret and wield the world around them to bring change. And women, it's the same, but from within them. And it's how they orient what's within them to bring about changes in the world around them. So in that respect, you know, men tend to make tools and be manual, whereas women would tend to make babies and be emotional to invoke their needs from those that have the ability to deliver on them. It doesn't mean the woman can't do it herself, especially now in these days of more gender balance between men and women, where we're seeing that women are demonstrating more masculinity and men are demonstrating more femininity. I do think we're getting to a slightly more androgynous human than previous generations, which does tie in with a very fascinating book I read 25 years ago, which basically said future humans would be a little bit more androgynous, but not in a non-gender way, which is the way current culture seems to be making it with non-binaries. It's in a proactive way where it's actively masculine, actively feminine, not passively neither. And this is to do with people throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to look at gender behaviours and actual gender energy. But anyway, that's all I want to say on this. I don't want this little answer to MJ's point to be an entire gender lecture, but it requires more than even a single lecture or a point-making exercise to actually answer that question. And I think I mentioned that at the beginning of the video, but yeah, this is just what I want to finish up with. Thanks.